All right, we're back, everybody. Episode 25 of the RT Machine podcast. Did you hit record that time, Dean?
Yeah.
Okay, that's good.
Yeah, make sure we got it right this time.
All right, let's introduce who's in the room here. This is Eric talking.
Ryan for the second time.
Dean.
John.
And this is Ron. I knew something was up. We were like 2 minutes in, or not even that far, a minute in, and Dean goes, fuck. I was, what? What's that about?
Restart. Well, John, this is your first time on the podcast. You're a member of the RT crew now, but have a long, illustrious career in this industry. So why don't you tell us about yourself?
Okay. Started out with Mereen-Johnson in 1986 as a mechanical engineer. So I was designing double antennas for most of the next 5 to 6 years, because that was back in the heyday. They were building double antennas like,
Oh, yeah, they were everywhere, huh?
they were everywhere. Now today, not so much. But back then, that was their big business. Besides the fixed arbor ripsaws, it was double antennas of different varieties, 2 passes. And obviously, we have one that I worked on here in our RT warehouse.
That's that Mannington one?
That's the Mannington one. I did that back, I think 1989 or 90, I think.
So now, have you designed that one? Or
I designed that
Oh,
one. So
geez.
I did the drawings and did the design, was the project engineer, worked with Mannington getting it installed. And it was part of a whole system with a 435, so they would rip their panels, their flooring panels, because that was a veneered solid wood panel.
Right.
And then they'd go through a 435, transfer those, and then go through and get their...
That was still there, right?
We had the 435. John sold it.
No, that's right. Yeah, we bought that too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's
That
how
went
we
out to-
come full circle, man. Dave Olson installed it, who's our current Mereen-Johnson sales rep.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So how did that work? The salesman would go out and sell the machine, figured out what the customer needs were and stuff, and then it would come to you, hit your desk, and you would have to make the machine, do the
They would
drawing.
write up a kind of a synopsis of the machine stations that they thought it should have. We would have drawings of the pieces that the customer was trying to cut so that we could double check that we could get all the correct tooling so that it could get into the correct spots, because a lot of times, with double antennas, it's the getting narrow enough. Everybody can get the wide pieces easy, but that's how tight can you get down to those small parts? Mm-hmm. So that was usually the battle, is getting the machine close enough so you could cut their smallest part with the tooling that they wanted to use or needed to use. So it would, and then, but the salesman essentially figured out most of that ahead of time.
Right.
So,
Who's that? Oh, it's
That's
John.
John.
so that was done, and that was started out drawing by hand.
Oh, boy.
So we were on the drafting board, and so you were, the whole thing was you never drew more in the morning than you could erase in the afternoon. So, and then later, in the late 1988, 89, we started to use AutoCAD. So we started to do that, and I was actually the first Mereen-Johnson engineer to start using it.
Okay.
Huh.
So, because I actually brought the computer in that I had at home, and they bought the software because it was that new back
Yeah,
then.
right. Yeah.
So we started using it, and then obviously it went. Everybody started by the mid 90s. They pretty much were across the board, but they still had a couple of the older draftsmen that never learned how to do it. They still drew everything by hand. So they did all the, modifications to old machines, because they still had hundreds and hundreds of drawings. Well, actually thousands. There was 50-some thousand drawings.
Wow.
So they would So all they would take care of all those paper drawings. And after the CAD came into place, everything was electronic. They still would print one, put it in the file, but everything was.
The earlier days when you started there, were they mainly just building one-offs? Like, so the salesman goes out, says, "This is what I want," comes back, and you're doing a separate drawing for each machine.
Yep.
That there is no
Every tenor
building
was
two
different.
or three.
Every tenor was different. There was hardly ever one that was exactly alike. So it was either different parts, because if you may have had very similar machines, a lot of trim, tenon, cope, jump cope, type machines were always very cabinet shop type,
Yep.
But there always was usually somebody had another part they wanted to make, so you had to adjust. There was a twist to it, so you had to, make the heads tilting on some of them. There's just a variety of possibilities. A lot of it was not very difficult. It was just changing the components to put onto the columns, right?
Yep.
So, but then as electronics became more and more advanced, people started putting more and more servo controls on all this stuff so that they could position it and make stack copes.
Faster.
Yep. Well, quicker changeover, everything. So, we made I designed one for Pella Windows, a 18-inch high stack cope motor. So it had many tools on it. It had a top bearing, and this was one of those that didn't go so well. The customer came in for the demo, and we're running all their parts and going through it, and there was a special backup bar that came in behind the piece on this 18-inch of stack tooling. Okay, and something happened. It didn't pull out of the way, so the next piece coming through grabbed it. So the chains drove it right into the tooling and took the one side motor with all that tooling and pulled it right off the column.
Oh my!
Right in front of the customer. So it wasn't the greatest day in my life.
I'll bet.
Hey, you brought it up, man.
Back to the drawing board.
Back to the drawing board. Obviously, they didn't like how that happened.
Yeah,
so
right.
if it can happen in our shop, it's probably going to happen in theirs, right? So because we're supposed to be the experts. So
Wow.
So we had to do a little redesign. It did end up working in the long run. But we had to do some changes, so that could not happen again.
That's a lot of force to pull the motor right off the column.
Yep. Those chains,
Yeah.
the shear pins didn't pop for whatever reason on the chains and pulled it right through.
Wow.
So drove it just one side. I don't know. The other side didn't, functioned as it should.
Right.
I never even knew about the shear pins until we were I just didn't understand the concept or even had never heard about it. And then we were writing the specs at Michigan Maple Block, and underneath the tenor there were just a bunch of pieces of steel. And I was like, Dad, what's going on with this? This machine's falling apart.
Yeah.
He explained it to me.
Yeah. So, during those days, it was a lot of stretching and, making the machine longer, shorter, just kind of different capacities, number of columns,
Didn't they try was it the 840 they tried to make like a stock type standard?
Right. Yep. We tried to make a stock 840 tenor, 820 and 840 they called it.
Yeah.
And it was set up. They had certain milling machines in their Minneapolis facility that they could set that up, and the whole plan was so that they could mill it all in just a couple setups and by spinning it and do it all quicker and faster without all the bolting together, because normally a tenor is the base, and then you have the stretchers and then the columns and then the chain beams and the hold downs. So we were trying to essentially take some of those components and make it one piece.
Right.
So the chain beam, column, and stretchers were all kind of all in one piece. So now, and they've sold quite a few of them over the years. Obviously, the problem being is because the tenoners were so, again, customized, everybody wanted a different spacing. So it just got to be, again,
Right.
the same problem. It was close, but you couldn't quite fit what that guy needed, so they had to go. And so it kind of died out after so many years of building them. They just went back to and then the tenoners pretty much kind of died as a whole.
Yeah, they did. They died off quite a bit. We still sell some now and then, but not like them back in the day.
Right. Yep. I
They're
mean,
made for production.
right. It's made for now everything is a just-in-time environment, because we would sell them. Anderson Window had 50, 60 Mereen-Johnson double-end tenoners in there,
Yeah.
making all those, because they were making the same size windows and tied it into the molders, and they would just have a, high volume, making thousands and thousands of parts. Different lengths for the different size windows, but essentially the whole same profiles.
Right.
Everybody wants custom now.
Right.
It's gotta
And
fit
it's
this custom
inventory
drawing.
just in time. You don't want to have a ton of inventory sitting on, that's the whole thing. So it's make enough that you need for this production, and then you may make it again tomorrow, but you're going to change over and make something else right now because that's what you need instead of more of the same parts.
Yep.
Yeah.
It's weird how that industry kind of changed that way. Not having so much of just high volume, but just a sheer custom and just-in-time manufacturing kind of taking over now.
Yep.
We went through a period, even with the used machines here, where we just couldn't give them away. Years.
Tenoners, yeah. Yeah, we had a long period of time where we probably ended up with like 10 machines out there or something. We just didn't know what to do with them. And then all of a sudden people started buying them.
Yeah, I mean there were months where we were selling a couple, and then our inventory would get down to almost zero in terms of DETs here.
Yeah.
Now it's slow again because we have, there's a couple Frumac double ends out there.
Right. Yeah, it's funny how our business runs in waves. You get rid of stuff, and all of a sudden it's all gone, and then 15 people want the same machine you just sold them. So
Probably all quoting the same job.
probably, yeah, it
A lot of times it is.
it could be.
So from, I was with Mereen-Johnson the first time about 8.5 years.
Just in engineering.
Just in engineering, and I got recruited to go to Midwest Automation, which is now part of Choice Group. Okay, so I got hired as their chief engineer for there, and they were a small company at that point. Probably 20 employees, and took over there. And I worked there. So they were doing laminating and post-forming equipment. So started there in 1994 to 2004. I worked there. I ended up being the head of the plant, engineering plant, and the whole works at the end, which got to be just a lot of people reporting to me. I had like 40 people probably, and I know all those guys that are out there with plants and they have all those employees. It just got everybody's problem was my problem. They didn't show up. I had promised this to go out today and 2 guys don't show up, right?
Yeah.
It was the same classic battle that all manufacturers have is if the people aren't there, it's hard to get what you promised done.
Yeah,
So,
for sure.
but that was learned a lot. Essentially created their engineering department because nobody was left after I got there. I pretty much started over, and we rebuilt their engineering, changed all their machineries. A lot of the designs are the same ones that I did with that engineering group are still being made today for that choice.
Didn't you have something to do with the layup rack?
Yep.
Yep. Was that you?
Yeah, I did their layup table, the one with the arm that slides out. I don't know if they had a laminated table with rollers built into it. It was a very inexpensive way to get a two-sided lamination done.
Yep.
It worked.
For that medium to even some larger shops.
Yep.
Worked
And we built
really
one
well
with
for-
we did the disc one too, where it had the auto disc. So it came out of the glue spreader. You got on all the, the roll of discs would come out with the panel and support it, and then retract back and drop it onto your, back sheet. And you put your top sheet on with it. So we made all sorts of those. That was in the heyday when then in Michigan, all the office furniture people, because what was happening in the 90s out in California, the technology boom.
Mm-hmm.
So all those office furniture guys were buying laminating systems.
Oh.
So it was Hayworth, Steelcase. Everybody was looking for those type of systems. So we sold. Our business went from, went 4 times.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Now you didn't make presses there. You just imported the
We,
presses.
we imported the presses from Orma
Okay.
and the glue spreaders from Oma.
Hmm.
So Orma and Oma. You can imagine those meetings. When what did you say? So those were always came in containers, and we would, and we had we sold some short cycle presses that would barely fit in the container. Had to be a high cube top, and the only way to get them out was with our cranes and fork. It took everything we had to get them out of the container.
Wow.
And we only had one that got dropped in. And actually, I had to go look at it. They dropped it off the boat with the crane.
The whole container.
The whole container hit the ground, and
Oh,
so
boy.
they wanted somebody to come up and inspect it to see if they could still take it out of this wrecked container and ship it to us. The answer was no.
We don't want that thing.
No.
No.
Yep. So that lasted, and then I ended up going back to Mereen-Johnson as a salesman. So that was in 2005. So I went back there as just a regional salesman and took over. And RT was my dealer because I had the Northeast and to start. It was
Yeah.
my territory. So that's how we kind of
Right.
got to know each other. You were my dealer.
Yep.
And so I got to work with you guys, and I kind of broke in my sales teeth in the Northeast because, obviously I was an engineer. I knew the equipment and all that, that's a lot of it, but obviously sales is still different.
Sure.
It's a whole nother.
The knowledge helps, but you still have to be able to touch base with the customers and talk to them and make them understand and
Learn that rejection thing.
learn the no word. That's right. So I was regional sales for, through 2012, and that's when Mereen-Johnson was bought out by the equity firm,
Right.
and essentially, at that point, we'd gone through that major recession, and machinery sales were hard to come by. I think you guys did better in the used equipment,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
During that time.
You guys got into used equipment too.
We had
that
to.
point, yeah.
That was the only thing selling there in 9 and 10 was rebuilding. We would buy those 312s, fighting you for them, and then trying to, refurbish them and resell them because people weren't buying the bigger systems that we were used to selling.
Right.
The moving blade saws weren't really moving because everybody was afraid to spend any money.
Mm-hmm.
So it was rebuilt 312s to keep our shop guys busy and
Parts business. I
parts
assume.
business, right? Keep as many machines out there because that's really, they survived on the parts business. It wasn't the machinery sales because it was as low as it probably ever had been in many, many, many years.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it was a rough time.
So at that point, though, when the equity firm purchased Mereen-Johnson, they pretty much, as all equity firms do, they come out and take out all the fat. So the whole top layer of the management team was let go that day, the first day they took over. So suddenly I became from regional sales manager to the sales manager because I was the only salesman left.
Everybody else was gone.
Everybody else, they let go.
Huh.
Well, Marv was part of the reason with him was because he was family, or he was on the board, or something. I heard.
Yeah, both. He
Yeah.
had,
He was part of the decision to sell the company.
right, he was part, even though I think he voted not to.
Oh, was that right?
I think so, right.
That probably didn't help then.
Yeah. He probably signed his death warrant at that point. Especially when it went through.
Because I don't think he was anticipating that. He didn't.
No, I don't think nobody really knew what was happening. It's a scary time when you are told that you're going to be reporting to the conference room one at a time.
Yeah.
And some people came back out of that office and was packing up after that meeting. So, luckily we found out if you were the later in the day you were more likely to be around. They cut the people that were going to cut were the first meetings.
Huh.
So that was
That
pretty
makes sense, I guess.
Yeah, you got rid of that, and then you brought in the people you're keeping to say, "Hey, you are now the sales manager."
How are you going to sell more machines?
Right. And that pretty much was the I will remember that day because they pretty much came in and said, "Well, that you're kind of under pressure because you're going to pretty much make or break this because you're the only salesman left." So
You're like, whose fault is that?
How many other ones did they have at that? I mean, Marv was a sales manager at that point.
right, it was just Marv and I were the only two left
Oh, okay.
at that point.
Oh, okay.
That was it because Dave Berglund had been laid off during that recession.
Okay.
So, and business did not, the beauty of the equity firm, it was like almost magic. They came in and bought in, I think it was November. And like January, the floodgates started to
It
open
took
up.
off, huh? Mm-hmm.
So business suddenly turned different. People started to finally, it wasn't because me, even though I say
He'll take credit.
I'll
for
take
that.
credit.
It looked good.
It looked good, yeah. Yeah, see, I became sales manager, and all of a sudden,
Yeah, look at what
our
I've done.
sales are going way up. But whatever reason, we've all been through enough of them, ups and downs, where sometimes there's no rhyme or reason. But it started to turn, and our sales just steadily increased from 2012 to today. So.
Tim Brown was still there at the time. Was he in
Yeah,
sales?
he was in a support role.
And Jaws was too.
Dave Joslin was in a support role, right. So they took the inside calls, but I was the only guy going
On the road.
on the road. So that was
It's a lot of territory.
it was a lot of territory. It was a lot of territory. So, but it ended up it all worked out, and then we started adding salesmen as things go, and we got back up to, I believe we had 5 salesmen at, covering the different areas of the country. So,
That's probably where they are now.
Yeah.
Something like that.
yeah,
Is that right?
I think they pretty much kept the same territory, responsibilities. It's just different people now. So a lot of the older Mereen-Johnson people are starting to retire. So
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep. There was a group of us all hired in that mid-'80s that are all now starting to retire.
Yeah. It's kind of a problem with some of this with this industry.
Yep. So that's kind of, and then, what was selling at that point now was obviously the moving blade ripsaws started to take off. I mean, they had taken off before that.
So what's this? Right around 2012?
Yep, 2012. I mean, they had been important in the early 2000s. The competitors really beat Mereen-Johnson to the Wynett came out with their KM series, in the late 90s.
Yeah. Yeah. Plate
you know,
nice, yeah.
right? Made their move that if you're going to sell Weineck molders, you got to sell Raymond ripsaws. And so they were very successful selling molders and those ripsaws
Packages, yeah.
packages. That was their, they had that molder and the ripsaw on the trailer and rode it around, with the sales guy in it, showing people how to do it, how great it was.
They tried to buy Mereen-Johnson, didn't they?
Not that I not
No? For some reason I thought they did.
not that I know of them. That one I don't never heard of that one.
Hmm.
So there was other people that wanted to either work with us or try buying it, but not them.
I think, wasn't there one story that Chuck refused to sell to somebody because they wouldn't commit that they would provide a part for serial number 1?
That would be
that
Yep,
was a
the
story.
original Chuck Johnson
Yeah.
probably would. That would be kind of his thing. He was a family. Johnson started it, so his grandfather, I believe, started it. So, so he was. That would have been kind of something he would have said, but. So the moving blade ripsaws were, people more efficiency. As we talked about before, the tenoners had everything was more smaller batch sizes, right? So now the moving blade ripsaws become important when you have multiple sizes to cut and you want smaller quantities. You just want to fill those orders and not cut a lot of extra and then have to, band it up and put it back in the warehouse, right? You want to cut what you need and machine it, put the product together, and then get it out the door, start the next day. So
when did they start doing their optimization, running with like the scouts or a tracker, or using that value rip to start optimizing?
the first scout system was 2006.
And before that, you paired up with people like Cameron.
Cameron made it, so they made their first, that was at that show. I mean, we had tested it in a place in Wisconsin, Four Seasons it was called. So we built the first 524 moving blade ripsaw and paired it with that Scout, and they tested it for a year for us before we brought it out and sold. And so, that's become a very popular saw now for them. And then that saw was such a good machine as far as parts, and it just it could run and run and run, and the hubs lasted years. We've got Tim Shirk that down in Pence.
7 years?
7 years on his hubs, and we know he ran that thing hard.
Yes, he does.
Yep. So he ran that machine hard, and his moving blade, and he was gluing off it, lasted for 6-7 years before he finally,
Put another hub in it.
put another hub in it,
Yeah.
put some hubs in it.
That's pretty crazy.
So
that's Alan bought his machine at Heritage because of that.
Right.
He'd gone to see the competition, and they didn't have the same results. So he after he went to see Tim Shirk, it iced the deal. Yeah.
Yep. I mean, and that's the difference between what I would say is the foreign competition and Mereen-Johnson's machine is the parts last a lot longer. The chains and those moving blade hubs, cast iron chains, we all know once they got to replace them, it's a big bill, $60,000, $100,000 for some of those machines, depending on, and then to keep the glue joint,
You have to.
They have to replace their hubs quite often, and they do have to because, again, the width of those hubs on a Mereen-Johnson is 3.5 inches about, and they're 1.25 inches on the competition. And all the competition's very much the same because they're all copies of the same design.
Right.
You look at all of them, it's all those ripsaws are made in the same factory, probably in Taiwan, with a different nameplate and a paint job.
Yeah.
So they're all very similar in nature. So if people are looking at that, just beware when you're buying new and used equipment. There is a difference there.
Absolutely.
And you get what you pay for sometimes. You can buy one of those less expensive, but you're gonna end up spending more time and money on parts and rebuilding it and fixing it. So it just depends, what you're looking to do. You can get away cheaper up front, and it'll nickel and dime you the rest of your life.
Mm-hmm.
So
Well, I carry one of the track pads with me, pretty much all the time.
yeah.
So I need to get one of the hubs in the bag, but
That'd be something
a heavy-
to carry. Yeah.
maybe that one there stays in the truck.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that design came out then, and then they had already built a 312 SR1.
Okay.
Before that, to kind of try to compete against the Weinig saw.
Well, the early one was the Tiger Stop.
Right, the Tiger Stop, and then they did their own servo, but it was all on a different design platform. Okay, had a different hub. It had the same style hub as what they were using on their 424 SR4s and the 2+4s.
Right.
So it was all kind of using the same components from that, where the 524 is pretty much a ground up new design.
Okay.
So that, and the engineers did a good job. Like I said, those hubs and everything lasted. The shaft that they coat with that, there's a special coating on the Mereen-Johnson shaft that makes it last longer, and it lubricates those hubs, and that's why they get the life that they do. So, but then from that we said, well, why can't we do this on the 312? Use the same thing and put 2 moving blades on the 312. Now they have, I believe they've done the short stock 4 moving blade 12-inch machine. So, right. But back then we did the 2 moving blade, and then we did they called it the gravity chute, was the first optimizing system they did, which was the board slid down, hit the fence, kind of got pulled against the fence by the rollers, and that was measured at one point. So you'd measure the board at just the front part of the board, and then the lasers would move, and then you adjust the lasers to where you really wanted them if that measurement wasn't good for you. So that was the first optimizing system for that little 312. Yeah. And then they went, again, we saw how well the software had done with the Scout system.
Yep.
And so then same software became the tracker. Obviously, it's not quite the same because you can't process as much lumber on a tracker as you can on a Scout if you're in semi-automatic mode. Yep. Because with a Scout system, your laser stand is out front, so you can work on a board while one's going through the saw. Yep. So you can just get more throughput there.
You're solving a solution before it needs to go.
Right.
That way it's ready.
Right. In automatic mode, a tracker and a Scout should produce the same.
As long as you're keeping the deck full.
As long as you're keeping the deck full. Then it's an operator problem, not a machine issue. You got to just keep feeding the boards as fast as it can take them. Obviously, the tracker doesn't have the board dealer and all that stuff, so you got to. But that was when the tracker came in to try to get that same 16 sensors on a 16-foot system to get a better shape of the board.
Okay. So that's giving you all your side bend and
right. So you're
widths
getting
of everything.
Right. You're getting your side bend and widths. Okay. So that gave you a better solution right up front. And so for some people, if you're running, better grade material, they probably should be in automatic mode. Too many people are worrying about, having the operator make all those decisions. Right. And I've always came to the conclusion that the more time, if you can get away without the operator having to look at it, you're probably better off because,
he's probably more likely to make a mistake than that computer.
He's going to make over the course of a day, he's going to make more mistakes than the computer will. Yeah, neither system is perfect because the computer's not going to see any defects, but, you're going to see more productivity and it's just a matter of what they can get. You know, if they're looking at colors and if they got to have clear knot, you know, clear pieces, no knots.
Yep.
Obviously, they got to run in semi-automatic and cut around the stuff.
And I can see if you're running really expensive lumber like a walnut or some for other exotic, maybe wanting an operator there to confirm everything. But
Yep. So, I mean, you know, the beauty, everybody had back in the days, it was a 312 and a 424, right? Everybody had those, and they just wanted, what would they do? They would sort their material.
Yeah, pre-sort.
Pre-sort, so they would have everything in bundles of 7s and 8s,
Right.
5s and 6s,
To match the arbor.
match the arbor, so that then they had to, so you had to go through a bunch of labor ahead of the rip saw to get a good yield, because you know, you could only get so many combinations on your arbor.
Right.
So the moving blade now gives you that opportunity. If you don't, you know, I would always kind of push people, if I saw them sorting all that material, I said, okay, are you only sorting because you need it to get a good yield at your fixed arbor saw? If that's the only reason you're doing it, how much labor are you spending up there, right, to do that? Where a moving blade saw now, you don't need to sort. You can just bring the pieces down, run them through. You're going to get the best yield. As long, you know, on a moving blade saw, the best thing is the more sizes you give it, the better yield you're going to get.
Right, yeah.
You know, and
Yep.
and I know you guys we've talked about it before, that, you know, one moving blade gets you the most bang for your buck. The second moving blade will gain you a little more yield, a lot more different variety of pieces. And then, you know, the all moving system, with the all moving system, you will get a little more yield,
Yep.
but it's just a better mix. You don't have any fixed pockets, right? So you can get any combination.
Anything you need. Yeah.
Any combination, you're going to get a slightly better yield. But, you know, from a fixed arbor, you know, people would be in the 80, you know, if they were getting in the low 80s, they were doing good. You
They
know,
were always chasing that more pockets. That's when they went to the 31-inch.
right, 40 inch, you know, you just kept trying to get
Yeah.
more and more pockets. And that's, you know, a fixed arbor is bulletproof. There's
Yeah.
very little maintenance to it. Obviously, though, the problem being is, you know, in today's just-in-time variety, if you screwed something up at the molder, now you had to go to the straight line, you know, or is the arbor set up? I need 3 pieces of 2.5, right?
Exactly.
Oh,
What's in there?
yeah, what's in there? No, we pulled that. So everybody went through. So the moving blade, well, now you can just go up and hit that size, type it in, and run your 3 pieces through that you needed to finish that order.
Yep.
You know,
Now there's some different customers running like a 31-inch arbor with maybe one pocket that's a 2-inch. The next one beside it might be a 4-inch, and then a 3-inch, and then a 6-inch pocket with the moving fence. Where does that kind of factor in when we start looking at a fixed blade with just the moving fence and a bunch of different pocket sizes versus like the moving blades?
well, if you've only got 3, 4, 5 sizes, and that's all the sizes you ever cut, you probably can get all your combinations on a fixed arbor saw. That
Yeah, and you can design it.
you can design that
get the
arbor
maximum yield.
to get the maximum yield you're going to get, because those are the only sizes I need. So, you know, that's kind of why I won't sell a moving blade saw to somebody that doesn't need it. You know,
Yep.
if you can get by with a fixed arbor, no maintenance, bulletproof, you should do it.
Yep.
You know,
Maybe just a little bit longer of an arbor.
might get you enough
instead of going
combinations.
to a
Right.
moving blade.
Yeah. So typically, the wider the pieces, the tougher it gets, because you know, if you've got 2 inches and 3, and then you 6, 7, you know, and then you use up a lot of arbor for those big pieces. That's where that moving blade typically starts to be more. But if you're using a lot of smaller combinations of 2s and 3s and 1.5s, and you know, and plus there's no minimum on a fixed arbor saw. So those people that need 3/4 or whatever, you know, for whatever product they may need it, a lot of times it's the shoe molding that's the scrap.
All right.
They're using up the scrap on a shoe mold, or
On the minute you throw in a need for a random for glue up, I mean, the moving blade just takes over.
Right.
Yeah.
That's where you're going to maximize your yield. If you can use a random for your glue up,
Or isolating defects,
Right.
isolating knots. You
Yep.
can do that a lot easier.
Yep. I mean, your yield is going to go through the roof
Yep.
because you're going to get the maximum you can. You're going to essentially be edge to edge,
Right.
and then you can work around the knots and cut your pieces.
You're still getting that glue line accuracy.
You're still getting that, and and people, when you walk into a plant, and we know how everybody starts out with their straight line, and then what do they do when they get the two people on that, and when they can't keep up, what do? They add another straight line. So now there's 4 people, and then they call you again, and what do they want to add? I need another straight. I can't keep up. I'm working overtime, right? So when they go to that second straight line, they really should look at some type of moving blade, small gang rip saw.
Right.
Depending on their product, they may only need a fixed arbor, but the productivity will go sky high. You want to, the payback is quick because people aren't easy to get and they're not cheap anymore, right? Everything's a lot more expensive. So
Going up
people should
significantly.
be looking at, what they have. That's those things that our salesmen at RT should be asking their customers is how many different sizes are you cutting? Do you change over a lot during the day? Now who was that we sold that 524 to that had 20 change. That was that one
Had what?
had 20 changeovers in a day. We just
Oh,
sold
that was a McElveen.
yeah,
Yeah.
T-Bird.
Not T-Beard. It
Or
was
no.
Jay Gibson.
J. Gibson,
Yeah.
right? So they were changing their fixed arbor over sometimes 20 times
Yeah.
a day.
It makes it pretty easy.
Yeah, right. So 20, even if the operator's great and can do it, and you had somebody else building your arbors all ready to go, just swapping those out is 10, 15 minutes. So,
Oh, yeah.
So
But
how
they're just
they were spending
startup
more
costs.
time. They were spending more time changing over than they were running.
Right.
Yeah.
And so that system took all that time and made it actual production.
Now, what were they running before that? Just a fixed arbor?
2 of them.
2 of them.
Two Mereen-Johnsons. Yeah. Then he had 2 backups for just in case one went down or something.
Right. Or off, or they needed this small run stuff.
As we learned, his backups were pretty rough.
Yeah, we got the backup.
So now, where does that second arbor start to add value to a customer? So when we start going with the Hogger blades with a 2+4,
Well, we've learned they haven't sold a whole lot of those.
No,
But
there's
it's
not a lot of those because it's a very expensive machine.
very expensive machine.
So, but it does get rid of your edge strips. Not 100%. Nobody can guarantee 100% because if your board is bowed wider than your hogger blade, you cannot hog all the material up. You're going to get something coming out the backside.
It's
But-
got to be pretty bad though if you have a 3/4 inch or 1 inch hogger in there.
Right.
But it will produce
Can.
some wedges sometimes.
Right. So that's what's the value you get out of that is for those people that are trying to feed a system automatically, like if you're going into a chop line and you don't want to have people in the back cleaning all that strips out. You just want to be able to have that material come out of the rip saw, go to the chop line, get scanned and go through the chop line. That's where those are
you're going to gain your
gain your productivity, and because it's obviously those people that are pulling the strips. You're not manually pulling anymore, so you don't need to have those people there except for that reason.
Yep.
So that's kind of where and obviously you get another combination.
Right.
So there's
you add more pocket.
you add more pocket capability. Now you can get 6 net rips. So
In the beginning, you were selling those more as the 2+ gangs. down in the furniture industry where the
Right.
second arbor was a fixed arbor and you could rip between pockets.
Right. And then you could have two randoms
Right.
because that each of the moving blade hoggers out front could cut anywhere between saw blades of the second arbor. So you had two that could be any size possible if you needed a randoms, and then the rest would be fixed. So that actually was a pretty popular saw back in those days.
Furniture guys liked those.
Oh yeah, they sold it. There was a ton of them, and then obviously electronics change. That's the big thing with all the moving blade stuff is, and nobody can get it. Doesn't matter whose system it is. Everybody's electronics eventually goes obsolete, and they can't get the parts for them. Doesn't matter if it's
Yep.
so. That's the problem with buying. Moving blade saws. They're good. Typically, they last a long time, but eventually those parts will go obsolete, and then you have to upgrade your servo system or drives or partial pieces of it. So,
Do you recall the very first moving blade saw that was built? Roundabout when that was?
70s,
Really?
yeah.
The 424 SR1.
SRs, yeah. They were I believe they were in the 70s.
Wow. I never would have guessed that.
Yeah, I was thinking mid 80s, but
No, they were making them before then.
We had a short stock machine here one time that was a moving blade, I think. And it was like
424.
I don't remember what the model was because it was a short stock with moving blades, but it was like a 1992 machine. And for some reason, I thought that was the first one. Maybe I just made that up in my brain.
No, they had been making them before that.
Okay.
So there was, I don't remember the exact year, late 70s, I believe was.
Some of those things are monsters, man. 'Cause
Well,
there's still a few kicking around on the used market.
Well, the ones with that huge overbeam,
Right.
the original 424s with 4 moving blades on them. Those were huge.
Yeah, they'd be as big as this room.
Because you'd park those.
I think Rocky Stone bought the first one.
Yeah.
I think
that design.
that design was made for him.
Right. And they park, so you could do your tool change outside.
Right. I had to just go way outside of the machine.
So you
So yeah, now the 24 inches out there, basically, right?
even more.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. They were huge.
It's crazy.
We still get people sending them in saying, "Want to sell this?" And we're like, "No, no, you don't. You might want to."
Right. You might want to, but nobody's going to buy it.
Yeah, there's a customer down south that brings it up about every year. We talk to them, and they have 2 of them.
Yep.
He's like, "You don't have a buyer for these things?" No, dude. Even for parts, everybody got rid of them for the same reason you did.
Yep. Unfortunately, they become obsolete. So you left Mereen-Johnson. What year was that? I forget.
Oh, I mean, after that, after the sales manager job, yeah, I left Mereen-Johnson.
Laser
20
jets, or I'm sorry.
or the
Water jet.
jet cutting. So 2018. So I left in 2018, was recruited again, and actually from one of the board members of Midwest Automation was now the president of the water jet company.
Oh, is that right?
So he happened to, the guy that was doing the recruiting happened to, I don't know, get in touch with me. And so I didn't know that at the time when I sent in a resume. I wasn't really looking, wasn't planning on doing it, but, they made it attractive. So
But isn't it? You give them a list of demands that
they
never.
met every one of them.
They're like, okay. It's like, oh,
Okay,
shit,
I guess I got to go.
I guess I got to go to work for them now.
Yeah, they gave me everything I asked for, I guess. And the only problem with that job was it was an hour from my house. So which
Yeah.
Ron is no one to talk to. He drives an hour and a half every day, right?
Right.
So he says, "Well, geez, that's nothing."
That is a big deal.
So it was an hour away. During the pandemic, it wasn't too bad. It was obviously, then the pandemic hit right after, a year after I started that job. Mm-hmm. And so we weren't traveling because I planned on traveling half the time, in which case the airport's 25 minutes from my house. So it
Didn't matter.
Now, what were
Didn't
you
matter.
doing there?
I was the sales manager.
You were the sales manager.
Yep. And we had 5 outside salesmen. So I would either be traveling with them, or I took the worst territory that they had. I took the West Coast because that's where all the competitor machines were mostly built. So, so I went out there and tried to resurrect, because they'd given up because they weren't selling much of anything out on the West Coast. But then like I said, the pandemic hit. Everything kind of just fell apart. They were still selling machines. This was more, water jets are in that metal industry, titanium. We were making, I can't tell you the exact part because I signed it, but parts for fighter jets that had little hexagon holes for cooling, thousands and thousands of them in a sheet of titanium. The run time for one part was like 40 hours on a water jet.
Damn.
Okay.
Wow.
So that was the type of systems that I was selling there. So that was kind of their niche, was the heavy duty machine. We couldn't compete on the low side. We were more into the high end. The customer that needed something that was going to last for the, because a 40-hour run on one of those parts, if you screwed up and run hour 39, that part was worth thousands and thousands of dollars. You thought that toilet seat for was what, a few $100s. These are few very expensive parts. I have no idea what they said, but just the sheet of titanium.
Right.
Yeah.
Can't imagine.
Yeah.
Huh.
So, and then my wife, who was working at the time, she was a flight attendant, and she had had enough seniority where she could do what her schedule was, she could set it up pretty much how she wanted. So, but then pandemic hit, and she suddenly, they paid her for like 3 months, and she never left the house because her flights would keep getting canceled during that They would schedule you, and then they would not take off.
That's probably one person who was glad they canceled a flight. The only person.
Yeah, right.
So they offered her, flight attendants. She was at the age where they offered her a buyout, and she took it, because it wasn't worth. They made it attractive enough that it didn't make sense to go back to work.
Nope.
When you're going to retire in a few years anyway. So
Right.
she retired, which kind of, she gets to stay home, and I had to go to work every day. So it didn't seem fair to me. So that's kind of when we kind of talked it over, and then I retired from the water jet company. So that was, 2.5 years ago, I guess.
I guess so. Yeah.
So, and then,
You sent me your retirement notice. And
yeah, I sent you a retirement
I
notice.
sent you a response and said, "No, you're not retiring."
Okay, so that's how I got started at RT. Doing the kind of the, but I work from my home, so it's in Minnesota. So
Right. Yeah, it works out well for us because we can send you the leads and you can make the phone calls and don't need to travel that much. Came out here today, but he doesn't really have to go very far.
Yep. My one trip a year into the plant is this week.
Yep.
Get you to help on designs sometimes.
Yep. I still got my AutoCAD skills, so every once in a while we do some layouts and do some of that stuff, and just
Yeah, it's been working out really well, and we appreciate you coming on board and helping us out, sell more machinery.
I think the retirement note, you actually sent it to both of us.
I think so.
Dad and I. And Dad and I have an office right next to each other, and there's a door in between them. And Dad pops his head through, and I had just read the note, and he had just read the note, and he pops his head through, and he goes, "You think John was fishing?" And it wasn't too long after that you were an employee of RT Machine.
yeah. Well, I think everybody's fine how it worked out.
It's worked out great.
So.
Yeah. Yeah, you go out and I mean stuff that's up in your way. You've gone out on a couple of calls for us. Helped Eric out at that one auction deal we had, and it's worked out really well.
Got to be roommates for a week.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep. And you call me every time you're going to buy a used rip saw that you don't know anything about.
I do. And a couple of you've told me don't do that.
You don't want that one.
Of course, I think that last one in Arkansas, you told me, I don't remember what you said, but I bought it anyway. You weren't forceful enough, so I bought it anyway.
Well, couldn't we?
Well, that'll work out for us. So the way we're gonna handle that one is switch it over to a fixed arbor machine.
Yeah.
So
Yep. And that's what you can do
What's
with
that one?
Yeah.
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 No, he got back to you like 2 minutes after you hit.
Oh,
bid.
that's right. That's right. I couldn't get a hold of you, and then
You'd already bought it.
yeah, I already bought it. And you're like, well, I guess.
Is it too late to say no?
Yeah. Can I change that? No, that'll work out fine for us. So
Yep. But no, so that's kind of the career path, and like I said, it's been most of the time in the wood industry. So.
yeah.
And I've learned a lot on this side because I didn't deal with all the other machinery so much.
Yeah.
You knew what the planer, the rough mill side we had, the tenoners. I knew. Obviously, I've had laminating experience, glue spreaders, and
You're like
presses.
You're like an edge bander. What the hell's that?
Yeah, edge banded. Well, actually, Midwest bought imported edge banders for a while and sanders. So
Really?
yeah, so we did.
I knew the Sanders.
Yep. So we were making, and then we got into the metal sanders.
Yeah.
They bought Ranbright
Yeah.
was the name of the company they
I
bought.
remember that. I remember that.
So we moved that from Wisconsin to Minneapolis, and so that was got a lot of experience doing recovering glue spreader rolls and sanders and yep. So I've kind of had a little bit of everything, but there's still some of those machines where people call, I don't know what that machine would be. Ron?
You got to be a generalist in this business.
That's for sure. Yeah.
Thankfully, woodworking machines, a lot of times you can learn what they do just from the name. It's almost like kitchen appliances. Like, what's a toaster? Well, it toasts things.
What's a toe kick notcher?
Right.
That's like being on the service side of things. You can get a call and it's like, oh, what's it do? No. What's it not doing? What do you want it to do that's not?
Yeah,
Supposed to be doing.
All right, guys. Well, I think unless everybody's got any other questions for John, appreciate you getting on here and sharing your experience with everybody.
Yep. No, it was fun. It was hopefully the people out there learned a
We'll
little
learn a little bit about rip saws.
about rip saws, and
They wanna
if nothing
know.
else, they can call us.
Yeah, I was gonna
We'll-
say if they need to know more,
Yeah,
they
if
can
any
give
of
you a
this did
call.
not make sense to you.
Yeah,
Right.
Give John a call.
Yep. Be happy to talk to them. And like I said, it's been 20, 30 years of rip saws and different equipment. So
Yeah.
I think I have a pretty good background, can at least, if you're thinking you need to do something or want to talk it over, can give you the pros and cons. And obviously every customer's got to weigh those benefits if it's worth it.
Right.
Yep.
Absolutely.
Well, we worked on one for a customer the one day. Drew out a whole line for him, and it's like, well, actually, there's a post right here. We have to move this way. And then it would just, oh, no, we don't have a door there, so we got to move this. And I think you did probably 5 or 6 drawings for that project before. We're like, okay, yeah, this will work. So trying to fit some of these big systems in the small buildings.
Yeah, most of our drawings take 5, 6, 10, 15 drawings sometimes, renditions. To,
And that's service that we
yeah, that's,
can do for the customer too, is if they've got a plant, and they need, and that's a lot of it is what our sales guys should be doing too, is looking at, because we all know how business works. You start one end and you just kept adding machinery, right?
Mm-hmm.
And the flow thought never came into the process until you had all this machinery in there. Now all of a sudden, if you drew a line from where the product comes in to where it ships out and how all the different crisscrosses, right? You know, you
Kind
can
of like what we had here.
So that's
right
what we're trying to
material
figure out.
flow. You know, you can just save a lot of money on just making the material flow. You know, it's amazing how many times, just like our shop guys working on a machine, if they don't have the tool in their toolbox, the right tools,
They're going to look for it.
they go look for it, and 10 minutes later they're back. Right? They just wasted 10 minutes looking for a tool that if they would have had, productivity is. That's
Yep.
how you get better.
We all deal with it. Yep.
Yep.
Absolutely. All right, guys. That'll do it for today.
Until next time.
Don't forget to support our buddies at Green Street Joinery by subscribing to the American Craftman podcast and their new YouTube channel, Today's Craftsman. Both links in the description of today's podcast.